Welcome to Podcrushed. My two co-hosts are looking very partisan today. They're wearing red and blue.
Actually, yeah. Nava and I, the last few episodes have been on the same wavelength, like both in a gray cardigan, both in striped shirts. And today we are divided.
I'm representing the Chiefs. The last.
Yes,
sad.
yes.
Well, you should be in a sparkly top. I thought that those clips of Travis Kelce in his sparkly top walking out, so sad.
I've not seen that. He was wearing what, like a sequin thing?
It was like a matching set of like a sparkly.
It was something he
pants.
thought he was going to win in.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
There are a few funny, I do feel badly, but there are very funny videos going around of men in sparkly tops. Like, I think he could have packed a backup outfit.
I love that. Speaking of a sparkly top, hey, I think he'd like that. I think we'll have to just print it and go and see. Our guest today is none other than Antoni Porowski. He's Emmy-winning, New York Times best-selling chef who is most famously from Netflix's Queer Eye. He's on today. He's got a new show called No Taste Like Home, which follows Antoni as he guides a cast of A-list celebrities. They didn't call me, which I'm not sure who's more disappointed. But he takes his celebrity friends or acquaintances on an epic journey to explore their own personal histories through their ancestors' food traditions, techniques, and experiences, culinary experiences. It's very cool. It seems very highbrow and very interesting. It was a real joy having him on the pod today. You're going to love this episode. Please stick around. Welcome to Podcrushed. We're your hosts. I'm Penn.
I'm Sophie.
And I'm Nava, and I think we would have been your middle school besties.
Blasting the Goo Goo Dolls and watching ourselves cry in the mirror.
I just want you to know who I am. Right?
Perfect.
So we do usually start at 12. But because you have a show coming out that has this really lovely, unique premise, rather than saying, who were you at 12? We'll get there. There. But we would like to ask you, what did home taste like at 12?
Okay, we're getting poetic from the get-go. All right. What did home taste like? The food that we ate growing up was dictated by my parents' trips. So we traveled a lot as well as a family, but they took a lot of trips together, either with like a group of friends or just as a couple. And so like they were in Morocco and went to like Sharm el Sheikh because my dad is like a big windsurfer. And when they got back from Morocco, like we ate tagine for a month.
Wow.
When my mother would go to Poland for a month to visit her mother, she would come back with like these like little yogurts and this like smoked cheese that you get from like the mountains. And so we would just be eating a shit ton of Polish food for a few weeks. So it was really dictated by that. And I think sort of like the diversity of diversity exposure to food I was exposed to at a really young age, except I was an extremely picky eater. Like I hated tomatoes. There were so many things that I wouldn't eat, but then I had weird things that most kids didn't like that I really enjoyed. So it was sort of really all over the place because it was in Canada and we have 9 months of winter and like 6 feet of snow. There was a shocking amount of like stews and soups and just stuff to put meat on your bones.
Yeah. So when you say like your parents went to Morocco and then you were eating tagine for a month, that sounds not that hard to imagine now, but I'm thinking of you and I are the same age. So you were born in 84. So I'm thinking of that as like in 1996, there's not YouTube. Like, how are your parents figuring out even how to make a tagine? Like, how is that possible?
You know what? That's a really good question.
Yeah.
My mother was an excellent home cook. She really had instinct. And when we would be at a restaurant, she would try something and she would be able to kind of like take apart all of the different elements. I have a little bit of that. I'm not as good. But then she would like come home and like figure out how to make it healthier or easier or whatever.
Wow.
Like I just got this random memory of this like halibut that we had with like a pistachio crust in North Carolina. Again, when my dad went windsurfing, big windsurfer.
Yeah.
And we like came back and then she was like figuring out how to like roast it so that the temp would be good for like the fish to be fully cooked, but the crab and the pistachio mix wouldn't like be overdone. So she kind of like, it was all very instinctual, and she treated cooking the way I do, as like painting. Is like you're kind of like figuring it out a little bit as you go. You kind of have a plan. And that's how I approach it now. Like if I'm making something that I've never made before, I'm gonna go read a couple of blogs, like maybe get on Reddit, even though I try to avoid that thing as much as I possibly can. And then I just like let it go, and I'm like, okay, like what am I retaining? What are the main rules that I need to know? And I kind of go with it. So I think that's how she operated. Kind of, it was all very, it was like all in her brain.
I feel like cooking Reddit might be the safest part of Reddit. Is that not true?
I would, I made the mistake once of looking up my name when someone told me that people write things there, and then,
not on Reddit. No.
Yeah. That was a double therapy session. Never happening again. You live, you learn, you know?
Yeah.
So, you do have this interesting kind of upbringing where, you were moving a lot. You're sort of a self-professed nomad. By the way, I can relate very much, but for very different reasons, or I think they might be different reasons. What was it that contributed to your family moving so much, for those who don't know?
Yeah. So when I was raised in Montreal, and then right when do you graduate elementary school? Yeah, you technically graduate.
Sure,
A little
sure.
cap and gown
Sure.
situation.
You did.
It was cute. Yeah. And then my father moved to West Virginia. He was a physician, and when you move to the U.S., before you get board certification, you have to work in certain states. And he chose West Virginia because there was a lot of golfing and whitewater rafting, and a lot of Canadian expats were there. And so both my sisters stayed in Montreal. I moved with my parents. I was there for junior high, so 7, 8, 9, and then my parents split up. So for grade 10, I went back to Canada, and then they got back together. So for grade 11, I went back to West Virginia.
Oh my gosh.
And then I kind of had enough of being there, and I don't forget the reasons exactly, but they sent me back to Montreal. I know why, because there's 1 year less of high school, and you start this thing called cégep, which is like a pre-college. So I moved back so that I can kind of be caught up with everyone that was my age. Because if I would have stayed another year, I would have lost a year and I would have been behind. So the weird thing is, even though I have a university degree, I don't have a high school diploma. I never graduated from high school.
Antoni, you're talking like even when you were describing your parents' trips, like them going to Morocco and coming back and you having tagine, and then this picture that you're painting of like your sister staying back in Montreal and then you going back and forth. The only thing I'm wondering is like, well, who was taking care of who at what time? Like, did you have, it sounds like you would have had to have like extended family around, or like more like your parents had to have had a village of some sort. Like who was in your community?
You would think. I was like, when I kind of look back, I was alone a lot. And at the time, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, because I was like the immigrant kid with the weird name who brought the weird lunches, who lived in West Virginia, whose parents were traveling a lot. And my mother was in between Canada and the US, taking care of my sisters in both houses. And my father worked a lot, like 12, 14-hour shifts. And so I was the one always having like house parties. And I lived in this like gated community where I kind of had like my friends that we always really hung out with. So it was kind of like a safe space where we could get into a lot of trouble without any consequences. Because there weren't any cops. It was like security people. And this was like, it was a fancy place, but in West Virginia, it's sort of, there really was no, not like a representation of like a middle class. It was either, there were a lot of like mobile homes, trailer parks, that sort of thing, or you lived in a gated community. It was really like the extremes. So yeah, you would think that I would have someone watching over me, but no. Although, wow, I just remembered, it's fine. You know what? I called her Crazy Debbie because I had like 3 Debbies in my life. And she worked at my dad's hospital, and she was always getting into trouble for like just being mischievous at work. And my dad had her watch me once when he was gone for like 3 days, and my mother was gone. And I drove a car for the first time. I think I was 13 years old, her Honda Prelude, to Costco. And I bought my first DVD ever, Any Given Sunday, where his eyeball falls out, which is crazy that I just remembered that. And she had a weed plant in the back seat. And then she got me a bottle of Absolute
A weed
Mandarin.
plant?
I just unlocked something. Yeah, she was awesome.
To be clear, yeah, she sounds like Awesome Debbie, by the way.
Amazing. Yeah, we should change her name actually. Yeah. No, I don't. She wasn't like intoxicated when she was with me. She like really had her shit together. but she was definitely like, she had a lot of like side hustles and like stuff going on. And the weed plant
Okay.
had a name. I forgot what it was exactly, but she literally got me like a 26 ounce of absolute mandarin, which like when you're a very young teenager is delicious with orange juice and grenadine.
Oh yeah.
And
Oof,
I just
oof.
had like a little house party that weekend. And she was like, tell your dad I was here the whole weekend. I was like, fuck yeah. I was like, I want you to come back all the time.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Wow. I haven't thought about this in at least 20 years. Now, when I look back and in therapy and in conversations that I have with my friends, I realize like, wow, I was like a really lonely, I was like, I was alone a lot. But I don't know if I felt that lonely. Like I kept myself busy. I swam a lot every single day for 2 hours, and then
Wow.
tennis. And like, I was always doing something. So I didn't like being at the house alone because it was just very echoey and just like quiet, and there was no soul there. And growing up, I had 2 older sisters, and we lived in like a very loud, chaotic household. So I was either having friends over or I was like at someone's house, because you could just bike over and like walk into someone's house without even calling them. It was that kind of a vibe.
Yeah, right.
So wait, I want to go back to the first question we would have asked you. Who was Antoni at 12, 13, sort of transitioning from Montreal to West Virginia?
I was super excited to move to the US because I was obsessed with anything that was Americana, from Gap to the introduction of Abercrombie and Fitch and these like overpriced $90 cargo pants that I convinced my parents to get me. Like, I just wanted to feel like an American kid and just fully fit in. And I thought it was like the greatest thing ever. And I remember like going to school, and it was my first, a lot of people in like the LGBTQI plus, sorry, we're only allowed to say LBG these days, like experience this other thanness where they don't feel like they necessarily fit in. And I never felt that on that front, I think because of my sexuality and fluidity or whatever, but I felt like, oh, my name is different. The food that I'm bringing here is different. I had my teacher in the 7th grade come up to me. I remember like the first week, and she was like, I heard a rumor that you speak 3 languages. Is that true? And I was like, well, yeah, like my parents were Polish, so that was my first language. And then French I learned in school, and English I learned from like my sisters in Sesame Street. And her question to that was why? And it wasn't like she was trying to insult me or demean me or bring me down in any way, but she just didn't understand. And that's when I sort of realized like, oh, I really have as much diversity here, / at all. And so that was kind of this sort of like, oh, like I'm different. I'm definitely a little weird. And then people would make comments about my name. It was Antek at the time. It was like my Polish slang name. And then Porowski was just like mind blowing to them. They just didn't know what to do with it. So I think I wanted to fit in desperately. So it totally makes sense that I would have house parties. But I was like, it was very sort of like the public sphere of me was the party kid who had everyone over at his house and would like cause a mess and fill up like the alcohol bottles with water afterwards. And then the private sphere side of me was sort of, I think, just kind of like sad and trying to figure myself out and just desperately trying to fit in.
Yeah, I was gonna say doing research and watching interviews of you, and then of course years of watching you on Queer Eye, like you have this very effervescent energy about you. Like you're very enthusiastic and bubbly, but then I heard you say in another interview that you feel you have this severe social anxiety, and I was thinking, of course both can be true, and I was wondering, at 12, what were you like? Did that effervescent energy sort of develop as a mask for the social anxiety? Were you feeling that at the time?
I think it was definitely a coping mechanism. I love to make people laugh, and I was able to really turn it on when I was younger. I have less energy and patience for that at the ripe old age of 40 now. But I really knew how to like turn it on. And even when I was going back all the way to like 5 years old, my parents would have friends over, and I would dance to like George Michael's Faith and like pause when the song would pause. And like, I was like an entertainer. I wanted to be seen. It's like classic youngest child syndrome. And so, yeah, like I remember definitely I was always trying to like I learned to avoid pain from a really young age. Like when I was alone at home, it was like, okay, like what am I going to do to get out? I'm going to go to my friend Lauren's house because I know they're having dinner at like 6, and her mom always makes like bomb ass food. or I'll go see the Kellys and like we're gonna go bike around forever and like go hit the trails or whatever and see if we find snakes. So it was I learned to kind of to not deal and process my feelings when I was like 12, 13. I think that's kind of when it started.
That is now what every 12 and 13-year-old is doing with a phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Oh
we
my
didn't even
goodness.
have that, which is wild.
I know, biking around and looking for snakes sounds so much fun.
It's pretty healthy.
Right?
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's healthier than ordering 10 bars of Dubai chocolate on the TikTok shop.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
Oh
it
my
could be a
God,
lot worse.
Anthony, I
Hey, but it's
actually
50% off today.
I just did that. Wait, I just did that. I just ordered 8, but I served it at a party and everybody loved it. So I feel like that's okay.
Okay. I just ordered the beef tallow that you put on your face with Manuka honey, so I'll let you know how that goes.
Okay, let us know how that turns out.
So dumb. It's the second thing I ever, that and the sour gushers I ordered a few months ago. Worth it.
Okay.
You know,
but
See, some of
I'm
these
a
things.
sucker.
The only thing I've ever bought through Instagram or TikTok, oddly, is my co-hosts are going to laugh at me. It was natural chewing gum.
Oh, yeah, I
Oh,
get
yeah.
those ads.
Yeah, like I've never done it in my life. I don't think I will again because when I did it, I was like, why did I do that? And I
Wait,
don't
is it
chew
the one
gum.
that gives you the better jaw? There's one that they tell you that gives you like a more chiseled jaw.
That's why he bought it, Anthony.
I don't believe I need that one.
We're all victims to the TikTok shop.
Yeah.
But I am really curious about that beef tallow, so please let us know.
I'll keep you posted. For sure,
know
my
how that
face is gonna break out. And it's gonna look like a pepperoni pizza within 2 days, and then I'll stop.
Okay.
And then I'll like use it on my hands or my dog's paws when I take her on a walk, so the salt doesn't mess it up. I don't know.
It'll work
I have
out.
heard somehow that it does not cause breakouts. How is that possible? How is it possible
Interesting.
that beef
I mean, it's
tallow
pure
is not
animal
just,
fat.
Yeah, right.
It smells delicious. It smells like the honey.
Does it really?
Like I almost wanted to try it, and I was like, we don't need to be doing this right now. No.
So, you know, something that you have, of course, become known for, especially through Queer Eye, is being vulnerable, being transparent, being forthcoming. And I guess I'm just curious, like, at what point do you feel this reflex, which is more automatic when you're like 12, 13, you know, into 14, 15, 16, teens, 20s, when does it become more conscious so that you're like, I understand something about myself so that even if I'm doing that, I can name it and or I'm interested in others, you know?
I mean, I feel like you're sort of touching on self-awareness. It was shockingly like much later in life that I was able to put a name to the feelings that I was feeling. Because I for a really long time, 80% of my life is therapy, so Carol's just going to come up a lot. So she's basically a guest on the show. There are 5 of us here.
Love it.
She's in my brain. But I think that because I've always been a very sensitive person. Like I remember I was 8 or 9 years old and I cried the first time I listened to Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis. And I was at like a summer camp and they were like, what's going on? And I was like, I remember thinking like, it's incredible that a human being can feel so much pain about having their heart broken. And like, I don't know what that's like, but like, it's wild that humans are capable of that. So I was like I had a lot of feelings,
Yeah.
but I didn't really know how to put a name to them. And if it was something that impacted me directly, like I could feel empathy for someone, or if I'm at a party and someone's like really like going through it in a corner of a room, like I really take that on. But when it comes to myself, I'm really good at compartmentalizing and kind of putting it aside whenever I need to. I think I was raised in a household too. It's for me, it's conditioning and it's nurture that kind of like plays into like why I think I am the way that I am. And I lived in a house where I didn't always feel safe to express my feelings and to share what I was going through, because there were other characters that required a lot more attention and that were a lot louder. And I think being the youngest, it was sort of like, it wasn't like the classic toxic masculinity of like, you're a boy, shut things down. It was just sort of like, you know, it was my mother. Like it was, all the attention was kind of there. She like ran the show. And so I didn't really have space to kind of do that. And I was the peacekeeper. So I was the one, if things like really got out of hand, I was the one who like calmed things down with either humor, impersonations, or just trying to like keep the temp low. So I learned to be really sensitive about other people. And I think sort of that like bedside manner and empathy I definitely get from my father. I love human connection in all its forms. There's nothing better than like speaking to a random ass person and getting to know a bit of their life, or meeting someone, falling in love, new friends, old friends, like all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to me, it was very recent where I was able to be like, oh, I'm actually scared. This actually makes me angry, which is a very novel and kind of like because I thought I really had my shit together emotionally in terms of that connection of like mind, body, and heart. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it definitely came a lot later in life for me, I feel, than some people.
This episode of Podcrushed is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Every time I go on Booking.com to find a place for us to stay within the US, I know that they're going to have exactly what I'm looking for. They have a huge variety of options, from hotels to vacation rentals, and I'm always able to find something that fits my specific needs. I have found that Booking.com has something for everyone. We are currently planning a little trip to Austin to see some family and some friends. And, you know, now that we have a baby in the mix, there's more of us, and it's a little bit inconvenient to descend upon someone's home. So we are turning to Booking.com to find the perfect place for us to stay that's in the right spot, in our price range. Booking.com has it all. No matter who you are, Booking.com helps you find a place that's ridiculously right for you. Find exactly what you're looking for on Booking.com, Booking.yeah.
Meet JLab. Headphones as versatile as you. You can work out, you can rock out, you can tune out, actually, if you need to. Sometimes it's necessary. Find the perfect fit with JLab. JLab's diverse collection of headphones has something for everyone in every moment. You can think headphones in a million different colors and styles with features you actually want for working out, chilling out, or jamming out. You know, for travel, I use the Epic Lux ANC over-ear headphones, and they're really comfortable and they're sleek. They look pretty sexy. They have the longest active noise canceling playtime out there, clocking in at over 60 hours. And, you know, I do travel a lot for work. And these are perfect on the plane, the LA to New York cross-country flights. I can catch up on podcasts I want, which is typically this one. You know, I just listen to my own voice on repeat. And these, no, that's not true. These are great for movies. It's so good on a flight. I don't have to crank the volume to drown out my snoring neighbor or the sound of the plane's engine. So if you want a more open experience, you know, not noise canceling, where you can hear your surroundings and still listen, you should check out JLab's Flex Open and JBud's Open Sports Styles. Look for the blue box at retailers everywhere, or shop jlab.com and use code PODCRUSHED for 15% off your order today. So we're hearing a lot about your interior and your feelings, which is great, because that's kind of what we do. I'm also curious what whether it was academic or like, where were your interests and where did you see yourself going at this point?
Always wanted to be an actor. Always,
Okay.
since I was a little kid. I loved like pretending I was on the Titanic and like roll down the stairs, and my mother would think that I would like hurt myself. I also had like a deep obsession with the Titanic, but that's neither here nor there. And I think as I wanted to be in films and just to play characters. I loved being the bad guy, and I loved directing my friends of like how they were going to walk in and like who was going to fall and like who was going to throw the first punch. Just like classic boy stuff. And then I think as I got older, it was still there, but I think because my parents are, you know, both physicians, a lot of physicians in the family, it was kind of, I was like gently pushed towards that way. So I ended up doing getting a psych degree because I felt like it was kind of like the middle ground. But yeah, I just wanted to be in movies and like play characters and like live in a fantasy land. I think my understanding of acting when I was 12, I think subconsciously, was that I would get to kind of like hide behind a character. And I think then when I moved to New York after university and went to neighborhood playhouse and did like Meisner studies, and it was like, oh no, you're actually like bringing parts of your actual self, like there's actual real human vulnerability that's there. Kind of opened me up towards that path. And then with Queer Eye, was not part of the plan at all. I wanted nothing to do with unscripted television. and I certainly didn't want to cook in a professional capacity. Like that wasn't.
Wow.
Those were two like, and talking about my sexuality, like hell no, like super private guy, which like landing literally on the gayest show. I say that with all only
Yeah, you
lovingly.
hit the
And then
bingo.
asked to share about my personal life. It was sort of like, God damn, I'm like, what is happening here?
Wow.
So I feel like I ended up doing something that was a lot more vulnerable in a way that's kind of opened me up in different ways, and that's completely shifted the trajectory of what I feel like my sense of purpose is now that I kind of like have this platform and just using it to tell stories through food, basically.
Okay, wait, before we, because that's actually really, really interesting, and I would love to transition right there into what you've been doing. So we'll get right back to that. But we
That
do
would have been a good
have.
segue, but go ahead.
It would have
I
been
know,
perfect.
We
It would have
can't.
been
We got to
perfect.
ask you a couple more questions.
Yeah, we do
Yeah,
have
please,
classic. We
please.
do have classic questions that are just in
Yeah, of
the
course.
in the adolescent space, more just that coming of age, formative stuff. Do you have a first crush and or a first heartbreak story?
First, I had two famous crushes. One of them was Aaliyah, and the other
best.
one was Gwen Stefani in her No Doubt days, like
Oh, wow,
early
yeah.
on. Like
They were
I'm just a
phenomenal.
girl. She was not just a girl to me.
Yeah.
No.
No, she wasn't.
I was in love with both of them, and then the first real her name was Judy Karam. You didn't ask for her full name. Why am I sharing it? And
People often do. It's really.
They
it's
know, yeah, they really
sweet.
they give surnames.
Yeah.
because
crazy.
the specificity allows me to like kind
Yeah.
of like tap into that, you know. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah,
crazy
totally,
Debbie
totally.
vibes.
Yeah.
And she was like the sweetest girl ever. And we dated for I don't know how long, but it probably felt like 7 years. And like we literally spoke on the phone from 9 p.m. until like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then one of my parents would
Wow.
like get on the phone and be like, "What the hell are you doing?" And we would just stay silent because it like felt illegal. I don't even know what the hell we would talk about. Like, what did we have to say at
That's
that age?
very
Yeah.
intense.
That was at all
Yeah.
For
profound.
4 hours.
And she would write these letters that were like 10 pages long about, and then I would respond with like how much we loved each other. And like I don't think there was ever any discussion about the future. It was just
Yeah.
so many feelings in this very much like in the moment. And then, you know, Goo Goo Dolls playing on the radio, and then we both lose our mind, and every single Shania Twain song, Still the One, and that was about us. She wrote that for us. And we would quote, and Judy would quote the song, and it was like, and then holding hands. And then like when the fingers got interlocked, I was telling my best friend Earl that they did. And then the first time we made out, and it was like, oh my God. And then the first time we made out in a room alone to get like,
Yeah.
it was just like, just these like all these things happening. And it was all like so big and grandiose. And it was just like, my heart was like beating like so freaking hard the entire time. It was so intense.
Wow.
So
Sweet.
then, is there a first heartbreak too? I hate to
So
ask. It sounds-
there was a heartbreak. It was unrequited love. I'm still close with her.
What?
It was her name is Lindsay Riggs. And she was one of like the cool girls. And she had like the BB top with like the little embroidered like crystals and like the bell bottom
yeah.
jeans. She had the coolest mom. Her mom drove us to Atlanta to the Up in Smoke tour with Eminem and Dre, and
Wow.
Snoop might have been there too. And she
Wow.
waited in the parking lot. We were in the 8th grade, and she waited in the parking lot while we went to the show. And someone gave us a sucker, and we were convinced that it was a weed sucker, and it was just like flavored, but like we thought we were super high when we weren't afterwards.
the
But anyway,
best.
I remember like I was just like, she was all that I could think about, and I would keep on trying to flirt with her, but I didn't know how. And I remember one time I had a sleepover at her place, and she snuck out to go see this guy, and I stayed in her room. And I remember just like sitting in her room,
Antoni.
and it was like gray carpeting.
Oh,
She had this like big brown dresser, posters everywhere, because she was like single child, allowed to do whatever the hell she wanted in her room. And like my house, everything was like had its place. And I was like, oh, it's like, damn,
Yeah.
I'm like, she doesn't want to be with me.
that's so. Honestly, my heart just sort of had a little. It
Yeah.
folded in on itself a
That's
bit. That is a
heartbreaking.
terrible feeling. That
So
kind of.
sad.
It's like because it's so in your face. You're there
Yeah.
because you want to be with her, and she's like, "Bye."
Hi, I'm going to see Sean.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, Sean.
Aw.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sean
Sorry,
Atkins.
Anthony.
Oh.
Oh.
What am I
Alright,
doing?
alright.
It's fine. Everything is fine. It's all fine.
We can bleep that one out.
No, I don't think so. And yeah, and I remember like when she came back, I imagine it's what my dog feels like every time if I like go to the gym for an hour or go quickly run an errand, where it's like just sitting by the door, you know, and then
Yeah.
as soon as she
Imagining
got
you with
back,
other dogs.
couldn't have been happier. I had no resentment. I pushed all those
Wow.
feelings down and decided not today under the carpeted rug.
Yeah.
And just like I think we just like talked until, you know, like 2:00 in the morning and then fell asleep. Also, I'm thinking, I'm like 8th grade. I'm like, why did my parents let me sleep at a girl's house?
Yeah.
But her mom was super chill and like trusted her. Anyway,
Wow.
just one of the questionable things.
You described yourself as a big wallower, which when I heard you say that, I could really relate. I'm like, yep, I like to wallow.
Yeah, she does.
And
I can vouch for
I
it.
can think of specific examples that looking back, I'm like, that's so ridiculous. That's so like overly dramatic. And like like one specific example is like my husband and I, when we were just when we had just gotten engaged, we had to go long distance and we weren't going to see each other for 5 months. And he dropped me at the airport and we played this song, Mended by Vera Blue, that was so sad and we were both crying. And then after that, I would continually be like, let's listen to that song. Like, let's just sit here and listen. He's like, no, I don't want to. And yeah, I feel like for a wallower, there are things you can look back on and be like, that's ridiculous looking back. I wonder if you have any stories like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's dialing pain. It's just like figuring out how to just feel. As someone who really loves to feel, whether it's joy or whether it's sadness, I have my instinct is to hold on to it for as long as I possibly can. And I think even like when Judy and I broke up, I don't remember the reason why. I remember just like being so blue and sad, and I would just go and reread all her letters that I had in my drawer. Every single line, like, could I find another word somehow, or like, was there going to be some kind of a hidden meaning? Because it's even at the, you know, when the breakup is done, it's sort of like I just go. I used to go and just kind of like relive every single moment that I could. And Earl was like my best friend. Earl Flores guy, such a cool dude.
It's an
I
amazing
adore him.
name.
And he taught me to wear two, because we didn't have calves and we wanted to look cool and we had cargo shorts. And so I would have 2 pairs of polo sport socks on to make my legs look bigger. So we felt really cool in our visors. It was dope.
Wow.
were
Visors. Visors, the
that.
Abercrombie cargo shorts,
Oh,
and 2
What a
socks.
picture. What a
Oh, yeah,
time.
and the orange parachute pants. Anyway,
Woo.
ADD's real,
That's
guys.
right. That's right. Orange parachute
and-
pants.
And I would call him, and he was dealing with his heartache. No, because he was like falling in love with one of my best friends. And so we would just like listen to, it was like a lot of Goo Goo Dolls, and we would just listen to songs together and talk about our feelings. And he was like my buddy who we just commiserated together, and we kind of fueled each other. It was like a bit of a folie à deux, where it was like, I'm just gonna like egg you on. I'm like, yeah, tell me more. Like, just like, let's go, you know? And so he was like my safe space to kind of do that with, because there's so many feelings when you're that young.
Yeah.
It's true.
And there's no
Totally.
perspective. There's no sense of impermanence that it's like, oh, the way I feel right now, I'm not going to feel like this forever. No, I was the only one to ever experience heartache, and no one would ever understand what it was like. And I was just walking around with my cross at school every day, you know,
Yeah.
and seeing her in the halls. Oh, devastating.
Anthony, we have one more classic question and then we're going to get to your
Yeah.
illustrious career. Do you have an embarrassing story you can share with us?
Apart from all those.
Apart from all those, yeah. Let's go more.
Dig a little deeper.
Oh, I remember, I would say, okay, just because I was envisioning kind of like being in the halls of Beckley Stratton Junior High School. Mr. Cantley, the principal,
Let's go.
Ronald Cantley. He would start every announcement with, I might not be perfect, but I think I'm the best principal in the world.
What?
Ooh.
Like
What?
Just, He led with that. That was like
something
that
going
was
on
like
with that person.
Okay.
Sorry to that
that was
man.
his line. He drove me crazy. He's such a dick. Not at all what a principal should be. But anyway, I was obsessed. Like you at that age, it's sort of like the girls would go to Bath and Body Works and like douse themselves with that like chemical
vanilla?
spray stuff that was like reminiscent of what vapes taste like these days. Not that I know. And I was obsessed with Polo Sport by Ralph Lauren, that blue
Oh, yeah.
bottle with that chrome
Oh,
little
yeah.
lid
Oh,
that I would
yeah.
get at.
You're naming like the exact same things.
Really?
You're naming the exact same things I was seeing
Yeah.
on the other side of the country at this point. Like, I mean, from the Abercrombie shorts, the visors. I mean, I never did the visors.
That was one year. Give me
Okay,
a break,
Penn.
okay?
Hats off to you. No. I mean,
Sorry,
look,
we're
it's
not all
Had to
cool.
say it.
Penn.
He had to go on the record and say it.
No, my friend, what I mean is that I was short and squat and I could not pull off a visor. I would look,
Trust me, you're being generous. I never said I pulled it off.
I had the two like hot, skinny, tall guys of the group. They wore visors. I wished I could pull it off. I wished so badly I could pull off a visor, but I couldn't.
Abercrombie visor. But I had this bottle of Polo Sport, and naturally, you know, when you're that age, puberty and all, like you're putting cologne on like 5 times a day. I'm not
Yeah.
leaving that at home. I'm bringing it with me to school. And I took it out of my locker, and it was obviously like those clangy metal lockers. And the bottle, like reached for something in the back, and then the bottle just fell and shattered.
Oh.
And Ronald Cantley, I remember now we had a different name for him that I'm not going to use, walked up to me, and he was right there, and he picked up the bottle, and he looked, and he was like, "But this says it's for men," insinuating
snap.
like I was a boy.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
snap.
What a dick, right?
No, really, something's wrong with him. Like you should not be in
Sophie,
that.
control
wild.
yourself.
Like he
That's
should not be a
wild.
principal. Something
That's
like you know, there's
wild.
like people. Sometimes I feel like you get really incredible because I was a teacher. Nava was a former middle school principal as well. So I feel like I can speak to some type of experience of like faculty in school.
Yeah.
I feel like there's one part of the population that is just like service oriented, there for the kids. And then there's like some people who work in schools who have some kind of like power complex
Yeah.
or something going on. Ronald Cantley.
First of all, and just to be
I
clear,
feel
I had
passionate
Now
about
teachers.
Sophie is naming names.
I had teachers who were amazing. Mrs. Bozeman in the gifted program told me that it's beautiful that I speak French and I should embrace that. V. Browning taught me like that was sort of like the introduction to English lit and got me like reading books when I didn't feel like it. So I had a lot of amazing
Awesome.
teachers. But
Yeah,
no, not
there's so
Ronald
many
Cantley.
good
I'm not giving him
people.
anything. He gets
Let's
nothing.
not focus on them. Let's focus on Ronald, whatever his name is.
Well, Antoni, I'm so curious because you told us, just a few questions ago, like you didn't want to, you hate talking about your sort of sexuality publicly. You didn't want to do a cooking show, like basically all these things you didn't want to do. And all of that is what you do on Queer Eye. So how did you get there? Tell us, what was your path to Queer Eye? And I also should say we've had Bobby Burke and Karamo on the show and they both had amazing paths. So I'm now convinced that every person who's ended up on that show has had an amazing journey to get there.
Prior to working to Queer Eye, about a year before that, I was working for Ted Allen, who was the original food and wine expert on Queer Eye. In the first iteration of the show. He lived across from me in Brooklyn. And I was his personal assistant. And so I sometimes like I made him sandwiches and like made lunches, made meals for like dinners and stuff, like a little bit of like catering stuff, and then helping develop and test recipes, writing like TED Talks on like sustainability. He was actively involved in a lot of the gardens in Brooklyn as well, in the co-ops. And so I was kind of like organizing his schedule. And at the time he was working on, still is, on Chopped. And so kind of understanding what a production life looks like with like car pickups and flights and all that kind of stuff. And then I ended up working in a gallery. I was a gallery director for post-war art and French and American deco. And because I wanted to have like a 9 to 6 job, all while working at night at a sushi restaurant, Bond Street. But all of these jobs kind of allowed me to still audition. So I was going to a lot of castings. I auditioned 3 times for the original Gossip Girl.
Did you
Never got it.
really?
Yeah, twice it was for French waiter. And they were like, "Oh, you're like French Canadian." I was like, "Yeah." And so it didn't work out.
Oh, they were concerned about French representation?
Yeah.
Je ne sais pas, mais ouais, sacre bleu.
But anyway, never got it. And then, and so I was doing all these different things. And then a friend of mine reached out. I'd kind of had, you know, I've always had like a board of directors, and those are like the friends who've been there for you, who are gonna just be brutally honest with you and put you in your place, who you can always rely on. That I kind of like, if I'm questioning my intentions or I feel like I'm not making a right move, they're the ones I go to. And a couple of them kept on telling me like, like, you're so obsessed with food, you don't shut up about it. You love to cook for your friends. Like, why don't you start doing like YouTube videos or something? I was like, no, I want to be an actor. Like, no one's gonna take me seriously if I'm like cooking. And I was just very like sort of stubborn because I had this like set plan of like this thing that I wanted to accomplish. And then finally a friend of mine reached out who's a manager, and he was like, Queer Eye's being rebooted for Netflix. They want a diverse cast. It's very like storytelling based, and they want you to share about your personal life. So I immediately ran to one of my mentors. His name is Klaus. And he's just like filled with wisdom and speaks in very short sentences, but you like really listen when he speaks. And I remember asking him, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. And he was like, well, why don't you want to do it? So I listed all the reasons, and he was like, well, you have to go try for it at least. And I asked him to explain why. And he was like, well, if you get it and the show is a failure, it's going to be a lesson. If you get it and it's a success, your career is going to take a different path, and it's going to open up your doors to different things. But if you don't do it, whether it's a success or a failure or whatever, like, you're going to live in regret, and you can't live in regret. You have to like, this is an opportunity to potentially have really big success or make a really big mistake. But either way, the feelings are going to be different, but it's going to be really good for your growth. So I was like, okay. So I went, I auditioned for it. It came down to 10 of us. They put me in a casting room with the other 4, with Bobby, Ten, Karamo, and JVN. And for the first time in my life, after going to so many freaking auditions, I was like, oh shit. I'm like, this is what good chemistry feels like. Because the showrunner, David Collins, was running behind us. We're like finishing each other's sentences. We were bantering. I looked at the optics. I was like, this looks pretty good. And then they put us in 2 cars, and we did mock episodes. And they put me in a car with 4 other people that I hadn't tested with. And they put someone else in the other car. And I remember we're driving up to the house, GoPros everywhere, set up like a real episode. And I remember one of the guys in my car went, guys, I think we're like the A team. I think it's us. And I looked, and it's like, we were all white dudes. And I was like, in my mind, I remember like holding on to my seat and just like pressing my fingers underneath. And I was like,
you're the B
this
team.
ain't it. Like,
We're not the A team.
We're not the A team. Something ain't right. And we did the thing, and I did a little food demo, and we did a little mock episode. I came back to New York. I got a call from Ali, who's in casting, who's so communicative with me throughout the whole process, which I'd never experienced before. Because when you don't book a role, they don't tell you like it's your nose or it's your performance. You just kind of like move on to the next thing. And she was like, you didn't get it, and you did not get it. They're still considering like you, but they were confused with the fact that I had gone to acting school, that I worked as a gallery director, that I had these like other things. And they were worried that I was like an actor trying to be like a food person. When my narrative was basically like, no, like 2 things can exist at the same time. I'm like passionate about a lot of things. And you know, and food is just one of them. So they invited me to go back to LA. I had to compete against 4 more people. And my partner at the time, I didn't want to go because I was like, they don't see me. I don't feel seen. Why should I go fight for this? And he was like, why don't you stop seeing it that way and kind of like shift your perspective and just see it as like they haven't had an opportunity to see you yet. So go show them who they are, who you are. And so I went, pathological competitiveness kicked in, made the best pasta carbonara ever using cold eggs, which is really challenging because you don't want them to curdle. And then about a week later, I was sitting in the gallery about to make a really big sale on this beautiful deco piece from like a ship that used to be part of Andy Warhol's like collection. And we like found it in the catalog, and we were so excited. And I got the call, and it was Rob Eric from Scout. And he was like, are you sitting down? And I was like, yeah, I am now. And they were all on the phone, and they were like, we just want you to know across the board between like Netflix, ITV, and Scout, like we all want you in the family, and like we'd love to have you join us. I cried. I took the subway home. My ex-partner now picked me up from work. He came from his office, and we just like stood on the subway, and I just like kept on giggling, like holding on to the railing, just like shaking with like excitement, because I was like, oh, I think this is like going to be a thing.
was a huge moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The F train.
It's interesting to hear how your background wasn't already so zeroed in on food and just everything that it can be and everything that it means. I guess I'm curious how you have embraced that, and how you are enjoying that journey.
I compartmentalized a lot. Like, bear with me, but even with like sexuality, I think a part of me knew that eventually I would end up with a guy, but it wasn't anything that I felt the need to like lean into until it was going to happen with the right person. And so I kind of like set that block to the side and I kept that part a little like separate from me. And I've kind of been like that with a lot of things. And as I've grown older, it's just become fucking exhausting. And I'm just like, I'm just going to be me in like whatever room I go in, because it's like, this is way too much energy and I'm getting older. And I think with food, it was that. It was just this personal thing. It was how I showed my love to my ex's family on a Sunday when I would make like meatloaf and like a root veg mash situation. Or it was how my parents showed me love when we were growing up. And it was, those were the happiest memories. So on Queer Eye, suddenly it was like, oh, that's kind of like bleeding into like what I thought my work life was going to be like. And from then, it became like public speaking that came from it, with a lot of like mental health awareness stuff and writing cookbooks and doing a competition show. And then with No Taste Like Home, I think it's in many ways, it's an evolution of that. It's a, epic National Geographic show where you get like incredible vistas of like the Borneo jungle and all that kind of stuff. And yes, I'm taking like celebrities to their country of origin, but I'm taking these individuals and I'm asking them like, what's a dish that you remember from childhood? Like, what smells like home to you? Like your first question. And we do a deep dive and we go to their country of origin and we explore sort of what was going on sociocultural, politically at the time. We break it down, and through that, it's like, yes, it's about the food, but it's so much more than that, because a thing that we realized like 3 or 4 episodes in, like I love talking about generational trauma, especially being Polish, having 2 grandfathers as Catholics who are in concentration camps, with like all my Polish friends and cousins. It's like instilled in us since we were little kids. And I feel like I don't often talk about or think about generational gifts. It's like, why are we the way that we are? Why are we very passionate about certain things? Why am I so obsessed with food? And we found this through line with every single person that we did, where they kind of had this idea of sort of like, Issa said it in Senegal, and it was like a beautiful quote. And she was like, I'm literally like, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And like, I'm here because of those who came before me. And learning from her that she had an ancestor who, in a male-dominated fishing village in Saint Louis in Senegal, was the first woman to import peanuts from Mali and started like a really like flourishing, successful business. And I mean, there are so many stories like that as well. Like with Florence Pugh, I asked her why she wanted to do the show, because if I didn't know them ahead of time, I wanted to talk and be like, manage expectations, let them know like there are no gotcha moments here. I want this to feel like a gift for you, something that you can pass on to friends and family and kids one day. I was like, why do you want to do this? And she's like, I'm obsessed with organic growing practices, sustainability. I've been cooking since I was like a little kid. Everyone's obsessed with it in my family. My dad has restaurants. It's like generation after generation. And then to go back and look and realize that there are not characters or people in her family lineage who came from like extreme poverty, who were jailed for stealing food, for petty theft, which is often what happened at the time when they couldn't provide for their families. Learning that then they used food as a tool to cook, to create businesses, to be able to sustain their families, and then had to pivot when crazy things happened and they lost their businesses. So it's like, it all kind of goes back to just like being able to like kind of like take that look back. And I think with food being the focal point of it, we're able to like uncover so much.
When I was watching the trailer for No Taste Like Home, I was really moved by the connections that it seemed like you had with each of your guests, particularly with Aquafina. I felt really moved by just the few moments that I saw. And then also on Queer Eye, I've always been really impressed with how the Fab Five has these, what looks like really personal connections to the heroes that are in each episode. And I was wondering, like, of course, sometimes that happens very naturally, and maybe it's something intangible. But then I wondered if you have any tips for how to form a connection with someone who's a stranger at first?
Yeah. That's a very good question. And I've never heard that one before. I really like it.
We all worked on it
I
together.
think it was a team effort. Okay, thanks guys. When I caught on to the fact that was the notion of the show, it actually made me really uncomfortable because I really loathe unsolicited advice from people. And I don't like people who like tell me how I should feel. Not that we do that on the show. And so I feel like my approach on it has been not unlike what my therapist is like with me. It's sort of, I try to just be a conduit to like exploring different venues of things that I'm curious about. So whether it's how somebody was raised, the type of food that they had, what their relationship with food is it more emotional? Is it more utilitarian? And that's always kind of the journey that I've tried to take on Queer Eye. Like I can stay on the plot, but I also tend to go off course sometimes as well, and just like figuring out what that journey is. And my scenes will change pretty last minute, where it's like we had an idea, but then I have a talk with them on camera and it's sort of like, no, this isn't about grandma's pie and recreating it. It's actually like this person actually wants to like eat healthy, and they don't know like the rules of like protein and fiber and that kind of stuff. And I have like a decent understanding of it. And I feel like that's how I can be best of service, like in this very moment. And what I learned on Queer Eye was like the first 2 episodes, I didn't share anything about my life. I just asked them questions, and I realized like that's not really working. It has to be this kind of like, is symbiotic the word? Kind of like a back and forth of like, I need to be able to share a bit about myself so that you're comfortable doing the same.
Reciprocal,
in terms
maybe.
of like building that connection. Yeah, really, like it's
Reciprocity.
reciprocal. Yeah, it has to be reciprocated. Some people like it when you relate to them, when they share a certain experience, and it's like, oh, like I have my version of that. And then I've learned over the years that some people really do not like that. That when they're sharing their part, they feel like you're taking away from them when you share yours. So then I kind of like learned to like shift and be like, oh, okay, well, like, can you tell me more about that? Basically, kind of, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not trying to like, I'm, not. My point is, it's sort of like taking some like certain tips and tricks where it's like just asking a lot of open-ended questions and just being inherently curious. And it's about things that I really care about, and just trying to go in with authenticity and no bullshit. And yeah.
Well, I was thinking about what you said, generational gifts. I don't have a question here. I've just been like reflecting on that. And sorry, I have so many divergent thoughts and I'm trying to put them into one coherent thought. But I've been thinking about like in a lot of ways, like modernity is an experiment. And I think a lot of aspects, or post-modernity, whatever we're in right now, I think in a lot of ways it's a failed experiment. And I think a lot of the failure is like this like extreme individualism where we're like fractured from our own families and we don't even know a lot of our history. Like I don't know a lot of my ancestral history. And like, I don't even know what my grandparents and my great grandparents on both sides necessarily did, but have like learned some stuff. And I'm like, oh, like I've done so many things that on both sides of the family they did. And I'm like just learning that. And I just thought I was some individual who happened to be good at certain things. And it's like, no, it was in the bloodline. But I read this passage from the scriptures of my own faith, which sort of describes something akin to like a family tree is a real thing. Like you are the fruit of the tree of your family, and certain tree will bear certain kinds of fruit and it will not bear other kinds of fruit. So it is worth understanding like the fruit that your tree will bear. Like you are worthy of like you are worthy of your family tree. So like certain family trees will bear like the fruit of like the intellect, and other trees will bear like the fruit of the arts. And anyway, it's this like really beautiful passage, and it talks about all these like beautiful different kinds of fruit, which is not trying to like keep you like contained, I think. But I was thinking about like in the past, like all the members of family would be like blacksmiths and stuff. Anyway, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I feel like we have this notion of like radical individualism where we don't even try to honor like our family gifts or even like understand what our family gifts are. And what you're talking about is something really different where like you don't even know that in your family lineage people did this and you're doing it. Like it's not even like a thoughtful thing, but it's in you. Imagine if we knew it and we tried to honor it and we could connect with the people who did it. I just think that's so beautiful.
I really like that. I think it's this radical individualism in some ways. It's sort of like, yeah, you want to pursue your dreams, learn who you are, learn like your place in the world and like what you want to do and what your sense of purpose is and all that kind of stuff. But when you start to get connected to where you came from, I think it allows for like firmer ground underneath in terms of a foundation of confidence, of knowing where you came from to where you're heading, that knowing that you have this like support of these, like, not to get all hippy dippy, of these like all these beautiful souls and like living, breathing people who like made
Yeah.
sacrifices, and it's like, oh, like I'm not alone. Like
That's
I'm
actually the
here
least
because of
hippie
people
thing.
like that.
That's a
Totally.
beautiful thing to say, and we
Yeah.
do, unfortunately, in our culture, we have to make the disclaimer of being the two phrases hippy dippy or woo woo. You know, but
Yeah.
actually, what you just said is extremely grounded in reality.
Yeah.
It's grounded. It's the definition of grounded. You're thinking of your roots. You know, and I think we need to do it more.
I mean, we need to, and for so many reasons, it's like, and if we don't understand the past and actually pay attention to it and continue to tell those stories, then history gets repeated. Like now I'm getting all like political and like worldly, but
Yeah.
it's like, if we don't continue to tell these stories, then you have, you know, corporation leaders out there who are making symbols reminiscent of shit that they were doing in 1939. And it's sort of like, no, like we have to be able to like detect that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Totally.
storytelling is like, it's so incredibly important.
Absolutely.
We do have a final question. Well, first, actually, no, I want to ask you, is there anything else about, because it sounds like we're sort of tapping a rich vein, you know, here. Is there anything else about your show, No Taste Like Home, that you want to share?
Well, it drops on Hulu and Disney Plus on the 24th of February. No, but I mean, I mean, this was, you know, it was such an incredible experience to go to places that otherwise, under any other circumstance, I probably would have no business of going to, like the coast of Senegal, where I'm like trying to plan a personal trip back this year because I was just so touched. I don't know. I'm kind of like, it's raining. I'm like in my feels. We're like having these talks, and it's just a reminder of how like exposure to diversity is so important in travel. It's like I was going through like a rough personal patch when a lot of the episodes were being filmed, and there's something about being around other people and like being so aware that you're like a citizen of the world, and like sucking you out of your own little problems, and seeing that there's like joy and pain and suffering and thriving that's going on all at the same time. It was just like such a perspective shift.
Yeah. Final question. If you could go back to 12-year-old Antoni, would you say or do anything?
I think I would tell myself, like, it's okay to stick up for yourself and to like share how it is that you're feeling. Because I think that for like a lot of my childhood, like I felt like I just wasn't allowed to. And it really messed me up for like a lot of my 20s. To know that I was like in charge of my own body and my own decisions and my own thoughts, and that I didn't have to like squash them down or just try to be agreeable for other people who were like more powerful and stronger than I was. I would have just like tell myself like courage, like have courage. Literally the same word.
Why did you say it like that, though? Oh, sorry, Antoni. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking of you.
It felt right to say it in French.
No,
you
it's
know?
so good. It's so good because
No,
I'm
I love
sure
that.
it is a French
Penn's always
origin.
trying to speak in French. He's like he wants what you have. Yeah.
It's
Ce
such
n'est
a
pas
great
vrai.
language.
Ce n'est pas
So
vrai.
great.
C'est pas vrai. Non, pas du tout.
Thank you so much for coming on, Antoni.
This was like like so many different like feelings and everything. Oh my gosh.
You can watch No Taste Like Home on Nat Geo, Disney Plus, or Hulu, and you can follow him online at Antoni. Podcrushed is hosted by Penn Badgley, Nava Kavalin, and Sophie Ansari. Our senior producer is David Ansari, and our editing is done by Clips Agency. Special thanks to the folks at Lemonada. And as always, you can listen to Podcrushed ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership. Okay, that's all. Bye.
This is basically going to be a trauma dump of my teenage years.
Exactly.
Yeah,
know.
that's great.
Yeah.
It's good for us if it's good for you.
Yeah.
I have therapy afterwards, so I can unload it all on Carol. We're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Let's tear open some wounds.